If you're renovating a property to sell or you're renovating a property that you're going to rent out, we all know that our customer, whether that's the buyer of the property or the tenant, will pay significantly more for one that looks fantastic and feels amazing. But that's created through design, and our misconception often is that design comes at the very end. In this podcast, what we do is break down not only the different stages and the steps, but also how you can double the profit that you're creating, for example, on a rental property. So let's jump straight into the podcast and get into it.
When you purchase a property or if you want to rent one, it's a very emotional type of decision. So you want to make it your home.
Yes.
Sometimes you're willing to pay a bit more because that's going to give you a different feeling while living in that property. That's more than money sometimes. Yes. Obviously, there are some people which they don't care. Yes. They just want a bed to sleep in, and then they have basic needs. With every big development project, you'll see renders online.
Yes.
So why not apply to this to smaller projects as well?
Gabriel, when it comes to interior design and functionality, why is it, do you think, most people haven't got a clue what they're talking about?
What I think from multiple conversations that I had with property investors or networking events, they think of interior design being the last bit which comes in property investing, which is choosing soft furnishings,
yes,
choosing colors, patterns, and so on. So the way I've learned interior design is first to cover all the technical aspects of a project, including space planning, do the renders, which is going to give you an idea of how the M&E is going to look like.
Yes. So with M&E, for somebody who's not familiar, we talk about mechanical and electrical.
Yeah, so mechanical and electrical, that's going to give you a clear understanding what you're going to have on site, all the power points, water supply, drainage, and so on. So you don't have your team asking you constantly where everything goes.
Yes.
And just to give you a quick definition, interior design is being the art of science of understanding people's behavior and to create a functional space within a building that is aesthetically pleasing. So you have three main aspects to this, to interior design, which is behavior, functionality, and then you cover the aesthetics.
And I think many people, especially in the UK, we find when people talk about interior design, especially around the property investment community, it tends to be, as you said, the final appearance bit that people are referring to. But there's many, many bits before that to get to that stage, rather than afterthought of just actually what's it gonna look like, which I guess is really more staging and presenting, and that's maybe where there's a confusion of what the role is.
Yeah, interior design is a lot more complex than people think, and then we take the projects all the way from architects producing the initial drawings. We take those drawings, we look at space planning, and then we're having a conversation still with the architect at that stage, also with the investors. And then we working from that point on, rather than, so as early as possible of getting access to those drawings without having touched anything in the building itself. And then to have a complete set of drawings before the rip out, which is going to give you a clear understanding what's going to happen with the project.
Why do you think that is so important to consider? Even if you're just doing, say, for example, a simple flip, or maybe a 6-7 bedroom HMO, what's the significance of doing this early rather than just what colors you put on the wall?
Right, like everything else, like all the projects, you'll have a budget for the project, and what you do the interior of the property, obviously that makes a big impact on your budget.
Yes. So
first you have to look at the elements which are allowed in a budget, and you can look at also how you can save money by using this product, but still creating the same kind of feel. So all the time we have a brief for the project. We know how we're going to design it, and we need to know also what budget we're going to be working with. And then we try to create a project and then an end result which sits well within that. But also to give you the clarity what you're going to be doing with this project, having all your technical drawings which you're going to need for the guys on site, but also to eliminate all those unnecessary visits on sites, extra costs from building materials and so on. So the same kind of clarity you expect from the drawings coming from the architect,
Yes.
you want to achieve also in the interiors as well.
Yes.
So that's because having, if you want to build, let's say, a house, for example, you wouldn't start building a house without having really accurate drawings from the architect,
Yes.
specifications, so on. A builder simply won't start a project without having that.
Yes.
So my question to you, why would you start a building without having accurate drawings, indication with regarding interiors as well? So,
because often we think, or many people tend to think about the process of, we've got the drawings from planning for the architect. We'll get building regulation drawings and that's it. We're just going to build everything off that. And the builder just wants those and they'll come up with a figure, roughly what they think it will be based off that, with no idea what the finish will look like. When the electrician turns up and says, as we were saying earlier on, where do you want the socket? You think, just put it there. And
yeah.
we're thinking on our feet, as opposed to something that will really impact the functionality of that property. Where do you think, or what are the stages, and when should the design aspect be considered?
As early as possible. As soon as you have access to the property, as soon as you have a survey done by the architect, then we can get involved and then start planning all the way into the project.
So rather than the architect designing the interior layout, which is often what we tend to do, we leave the architect come up with the idea of what's going to go where the walls and etc. Really, it's getting involved in that stage.
Yeah. So the way we work, we have a pretty much combined effort between us, the architect, and the investor as well. We were looking at what we're going to want to achieve. We have that brief for the ideal avatar of the tenant or the buyer.
Yes.
And we're starting planning accordingly. So we take the drawings from the architect, we work on space planning as the first stage, which is the internal configuration of the building. That's furniture layout, and that's also internal configuration of the rooms themselves. Sometimes we have to move one wall a bit to the left, to the right, according to what we're designing accordingly inside. So basically, the rooms sizes are dictated by what you want to have in the room itself, which is linked to the avatar. So once we cover that as space planning, we move from 2D to 3D, and then we do our renders, and that's going to help you to make an informed decision how it's going to look like, first of all.
So the renders are the graphic design, but they look very realistic. So almost like a photograph for somebody who's not familiar with what we're talking about.
The realistic renders, the images of the actual product which we want to achieve, how the room is going to look like, how the kitchen is going to look like, and suites and so on.
Yeah, and we'll put some images up to share as we speak.
That's really helpful, being obviously an image rated, but also that's going to give you an indication of how everything is going to be placed, how it's going to look like. Also, you can use those images to market the property way in advance of being finished. So if the project is going to take 3 or 4 months to conclude, obviously you can use those, you can push that to market, and then you can build that pipeline of potential tenants to have an interest on. Once that's decided, we move to M&E drawings, mechanical and electrical, which is going to give you a really good understanding where everything goes.
Yeah, so because design-wise, we have an idea of what the lighting or heating and how all these things are going to work, where the doors and etc. furniture are going to go. But then it's the bit behind that we don't necessarily see.
Yeah, so this is what the builder needs to know as well for them to give you an accurate quotation when you go out to tender, for example, a project like this.
Yes.
Sometimes it's best to have these M&Es done together with your renders to get an accurate costing on the build itself, rather than guessing we're going to have 132 sockets when in reality you're going to have 168.
Yes.
How they're going to price it, because they usually they do by points.
Yes.
How many points the electrician needs to allow when you'll come inside the property.
Yeah.
So you'll have those drawings, you'll have everything in 2D and also elevations as well for the kitchens, for the bathroom, for the entire area. And once that's decided, then you'll have also some more drawings for the kitchens, and then you'll be able to go out and then ask your preferred retailer to just replicate that to give you a costing, rather than leave it to them to design it. And just to finish up the service, we go out and then do a complete shopping cart specification for all the items that you're going to need, including for flooring, color paint, sofas, lighting, including all small accessories that you might think of.
Yes. So just to kind of summarize that, what you're doing is getting involved right at the beginning, once the initial measuring has been done of the building, in terms of that property, working with the architect and the investor to work out the layout in terms from a functionality point of view for what it's going to be used. An architect will be fantastic at creating the building, the general layout, but the specifics is not really their core skill. That's not what they do. So you're helping with that functionality, that design, with the investor and the architect, and then from there, there's clarity for the builder in terms of being able to price it correctly in terms of what they need to do. And builders are, when you ask them to change things, they might huff and puff and be annoyed. But the reality is they're very happy to do it because you're paying for it.
Of course, yeah.
You'll be paying for all these extras, and that's when budgets start getting out of control. So there's clarity around what actually is being built and exactly where things are going to go. And then the process of ensuring the things are in the right place, and the furniture, the soft furnishings, the colors, along with a complete shopping cart of where that's going to come from and where it's going to go.
Yeah.
You've heard the phrase, your network is your net worth, and you'll also hear it in this particular podcast as well. That's because people in property recognize the importance of being connected with other people. Property is a people business, and that's the reason I've been running a networking event for over a decade now. Each and every month we bring like-minded people together, an opportunity for you to come along and meet some of those people and also learn from other people on the stage, learn from myself as well. So make sure you book on to the next meeting. We're on the third Tuesday of every month in Birmingham. Now let's get back to the podcast.
With this process, we're trying to minimize things that will go wrong.
Yes.
Usually because you're going to have enough anyway. And then when you press on that button that you want to start with the project, everything's costed. And then you have a complete clarity that you're going to have this project by the end of it.
Yes.
Then within a budget, and then you have as much information as possible to have a smooth process throughout. Because property investing, as you know, it comes with challenges anyway.
Yes.
And then why adding another layer to it?
Yes.
And then you're going to be bombarded with questions throughout the project. And I'm sure that you're going to make some decision which they might seem right at the moment, but going back, I said, okay, that's too late to change that.
Yes.
Too costly and so on. And then we try to minimize all these compromises which you might end up having.
Yeah, and a classic one that we tend to talk about is, for example, in our HO rooms, we work out roughly where the bed's going to go, but then exactly what side bedsides we're going to have and where the sockets are going to go. And in the past, it's been, well, put the socket on that wall, and then we put the bed in and think, oh, actually, the socket's now behind the bed, or it's in the right place, but now the bedside is in front of it, so you have to move the bedside to get to the socket. Now you start putting extension lead on or something, and all of these things are because it just hasn't been considered in the first instance. So over time, we've started planning a bit more carefully. But an interesting conversation we were having earlier off camera, which really got me thinking, is what we tend to do at the moment is we get everything finished, all the design elements are done, we implement, we finish, and we stage and photograph the property. Those photographs are then finalized, a bit of touching up are then done. Then we start marketing, whether we're selling the property or whether we're renting. But actually, we were talking earlier about if the renders are done nice and early, as you talked, because those are created early in the stage, and the quality of those are so good, you can actually start your marketing way early, and you can test the market. And that really is a very interesting thing when you think about it, the massive advantage that you have on that, the time advantage.
Yeah. When you're not pressured by time, you have a lot of freedom of testing the market. And as we know, the rental market is booming at the moment. And then if you're the one setting the tone and then being the leader in your specific area, instead of going for 875 per calendar month for a particular room, you can just test how 950 is going to be, which kind of response you're going to have to that. And obviously, if your project is a conversion of like 7-bedroom HMO, you don't need a lot of leads coming in to fill that space. And then this is a massive advantage. Not only that's going to help you to have like a really informed decision what you're going to have as a project, but also is going to market the property in the right way for you to get the best out of it.
Yes, and when we take a property to market, we're always trying to test right at the top end first. But as you said, if you have an earlier opportunity to test, you've got more room to find where it's going to work. And with our rental, we try and always smash the ceiling price in terms of what we think is possible in that area. And all we've got to go on is the visual appearance. As someone scrolling through spare room, as we were talking about earlier on, something has to pop out to grab their attention in the first place. And that's going to be how it looks, how it is, compared to a lot of the bland ones. But then it needs to deliver as well.
Of course.
Not just look pretty on screen.
That's why everything, this helps. Obviously, having these renders makes you an informed decision, and then saying, you know what, this color doesn't look right, this pattern doesn't look right here.
Yes.
Let's choose different kind of lighting and so on. So this transfers into M&E, a drawing, this transfers into specification, and everything's budgeted out. And then the builders on site know exactly what they're doing with no additional changes and so on. And then you shook hands on this specific specification, how many PowerPoints and so on and so on. Then you know that you're gonna have multiple changes. You already signed a contract based on this.
Yes.
You're gonna basically what we present to them. This is the property we're having now. This is the end result. Please give us an accurate quotation based on this.
Yes.
And then you sign a contract based on that, rather than you going around in circles with multiple changes and so on, additional site visits, materials and so on.
Yes.
So basically what you're not spending on this stage on the process, you might be spending on additional time and materials afterwards. Not to mention that you can have additional headaches or sleepless night, not knowing exactly how you're gonna tackle the next challenge.
I'm smiling because I can think of so many instances, not only with us, but many other people I speak to as well, where we start off with the building, as you talked about, this is what it looks like today. And what we want it to look like is based on some kind of description we've got in our mind. I think it's going to be like this, and this is kind of what we want as the end product. And also when I speak to other investors as well, I say, your ability to be able to articulate that to your builder is really going to be how accurate your costing is. And so if you're verbally trying to explain something, you're never going to have that accurate costing. And if you have a detailed breakdown of this is how it's going to look, and these are all the items that are required in order to achieve that, it's so much easier, in fact, for your builder to give you accurate costing as well, because they know what they're working towards.
Yeah. You can always start with having a description of your project.
Yes.
But obviously this has to be backed up by images.
Yes.
Anyone can see an image, so I like it or not. But then again,
sorry to interrupt you, most of the descriptions tend to be high-end HMO. That's it. No, that's the only description.
It can't be that. So obviously all projects are different, and then it has to be followed by accurate sets of plans, M&E drawings, elevations as well.
Yes.
And also a list of items which they have to again follow and then place the order for. And then also being in a situation when design it's led to, I don't know, for the builders to decide on certain things.
Yes.
Then then you can't really blame them, because just because they've done, I don't know, 12 HMOs in the past, that doesn't mean that they know how to design it. Yeah,
they've got their own way of building something out, and they've learnt certain way of doing things, but that may not necessarily be the best possible way to...
Or I've been also in situations when I've seen recently finished HMOs, which we haven't designed ourselves, but I went just to see like previous projects, and then as I opened the ensuite door, the toilet was positioned in such a location, then I only had a 37 centimeters gap between the toilet itself and the door frame.
Okay.
And then I asked them why they've done it this way. I said, and they told me that this is how it was in the plan. So the architect done it in their own way, and then the builder just followed the plans, and this is what they end up with doing. And it's so easy to change at the early stage in the process when you just do space planning.
Yes, with negligible cost.
Yeah, it's just part of the process. So as a standard process, each step of the process, either it's space planning, 3D, realistic renders, M&Es, or shopping carts, comes with one proposed solution.
Yes.
And then 2 sets of changes. So we'll speak to the investor, and then we exchange ideas until we come up with the best solution for the space.
So even with an architect's drawing, when, for example, you got an ensuite and they've got a shower, toilet and basin there, they've put those in there. They're not necessarily expecting you to build it exactly with those items in that location or even of that type. Your shower tray might be different size or style. So how that's interpreted is quite important. If we just assume that's what it's going to be, and the builder said, well, you haven't said anything different, so I'll put the toilet there, I'll put the basin there, and there's your corner shower.
Yeah.
Then you can't complain.
The main reason why they're doing this is just for you to show you that it actually fits within the space.
Yes.
And then you can take those drawings and then, I don't know, probably use them for for planning purposes or building control and so on. But it's not necessarily the finished item which you can have.
The layout could be varied because it would be more practical, better functionality, better design once you look at it more carefully, because the architect is not doing that at this stage. They're not spending hours trying to work this out at that stage.
They don't go into that much detail because they don't have interior design in-house, or they're not specialists on specifying the right kitchens, the right wardrobe, flooring, and so on. So if you don't cover all these aspects in very fine detail, you're gonna end up with in a situation that you go there on site and then, you know what, let's do it this way because I don't know otherwise.
Yeah, and also we were talking about, we can think about this, or there's an extra cost for doing these things, which I'll come back to in a moment. But actually, if you are positioning a product, when I said we take a room to market, we try and break the ceiling price each time, because it's on how it looks and how it feels when somebody comes into the property, meaning you might be charging, say, a 20% premium on the rent compared to the market. And if you're doing that, that could be an extra £1,000 profit from one house a month. And many HMOs tend to work on about £1,000 profit. You've just doubled your profit. You have 100% increase in your takeout profit just by thinking through how it works.
Correct. And then a lot of investors as well, they work on comparables. So the usual scenario is just look at the area to see what's available. But you're only going to compare yourself to what's existing on the market in your specific area. And then if you give grade to yourself, I don't know, a 7 out of 10, this is how much you're going to get in rent as well. So why not aim for 11? Why not be the leader in there? So obviously that is going to have an direct effect on how much you can rent, how much demand they're going to have as well. And then again, I go back to saying that if you're going to have only 8 rooms in your HMO, it's so easy to fill those rooms if you're the one, the HMOs, which a lot of people, they're going to be have a lot of interest in. Because as we know, the market is very strong at the moment, and you don't have to do a lot to grab a lot of interest.
It's very easy to let rooms right now.
And
generally
and then obviously you're solving both problems. You're solving you having that peace of mind that everything is done correctly in terms of budgeting, information passed on to the relevant parties involved in the project as well. But also you're solving what the tenants are looking for, a fraction of the tenants which are willing to pay another 15, 20%, 30% more for like a more premium accommodation. Because this is what they're going to call home for maybe years to come. And then you'll be doing this once at the very beginning. And then you get the rewards years after year.
So if we think about, in a car analogy, there's lots of Ford Focuses out there. There's very few Rolls Royces we see on the street. And not everybody necessarily wants one or can afford one. But there is a market, a small percentage of people will pay a huge premium for that quality product. And when we are taking 6 or 7 rooms to the market, that's exactly what we're doing. We're creating a very premium product for a small number of people. We're not looking for 100 tenants. Within that pool of hundreds of tenants, we're looking for a very small handful who want a really nice product and prepared to pay for it. And there are always people prepared to pay for that product.
You might end up in a situation when you have only 8 rooms to fill, but you have probably 24 waiting for it. And then they might ask you, please let me know when you're doing your next project, because I want to be living in one of yours. Because it's so much different to all the other ones I've seen online.
And this could even be for a standard buy-to-let property that's unfurnished, just still thinking through these processes of design, the functionality beforehand. meaning you can still command a premium rent. I was speaking to a friend yesterday who they spent quite a bit of money making they've done a conversion of a commercial building to apartments, and they've rented them typically about 150, 200 pound more than the market rent. And he's done that because he spent a lot of money preparing them. In fact, in that situation, he initially was planning to sell them, but now he's decided to rent them. So he's gone, I'd say, a little bit overboard in terms of how it looks. But it's a classic example of he's achieving a much higher rent, and there's no furnishing in that property. It's still unfurnished. So it works in that scenario as well.
Yes. So obviously, as you know, probably when you purchase a property or if you want to rent one, it's a very emotional type of decision. So you want to make it your home.
Yes.
Either you want to be comfortable with this. So sometimes you're willing to pay a bit more because that's going to give you a different feeling while living in that property. So that's more than money sometimes. Yes. Obviously, there's some people which they don't care. Yes. They just want a bed to sleep in, and then they have basic needs. But also people there which they're looking for such property.
Yes.
But they don't have enough to choose from.
Yes. This reminds me of something many years ago when I first started flipping property. We'd renovate a house and to sell it. And that's when I first came across this idea of how somebody feels when they come into the house. And what we would do, we'd put a very thick underlay under the carpet and a nice carpet. So when they're walking through the house, it feels, oh, this is really good quality. And so they have that perception of quality in their mind. You have chunky door handles which feel nice and firm when you open them rather than flimsy. And just like the sockets are all lined up nice and straight rather than slightly wonky. So these little things, just 2-3 things I would do, would create a different feeling in somebody. And then, but when you 100x that idea, it's just on another level. Yeah,
there's so many aspects to this process. And then, like I was telling you earlier, interior design is a lot more complex than people think.
Yes.
Starting from even the layout or the flow in a space. So that's why we pay a lot of attention to, first of all, having a really detailed brief of the avatar and then understanding what they need. For example, a young professional might need this much storage, a desk, and so on, TV or not, things like that. So we pay a lot of attention and then planning this out in the room itself. You don't want to create any certain blockages where you do one step into the space and then you end up being in a maze somewhere. And you have to go around a certain object just to get to the other area. And then, but just like you mentioned, then I can add, for example, lighting. I've seen properties being done really nicely, and then the whole thing is being ruined by the wrong lighting. You have cold, you have neutral, and you have warm, and then you have different type of lighting. You have a general, and then you have functional lighting, all kinds, which makes a really important change to the space itself. You need one type of lighting while watching the TV, or when you're inviting people for a party, or obviously that changes the whole mood of the space.
Yes.
So things like that, small things like that, they will have an impact how the whole space feels, as you say. And then once you have a viewing, if you can have one to sell a property, like I said, people make a decision with their heart. So I really feel at home here. Let's make an offer today. They might say.
Yeah. Now, if I'm building a £2 million mansion, I'll be thinking, yes, I need to get an interior designer in. It needs to look amazing. But actually, that isn't necessarily something that's reserved for high-end property. What we're talking about is functionality and design at any level of property, entry level, mid-range, high level. And I guess the reservations sometimes people have, oh, it's going to cost a fortune to do something like that. Help us understand sort of for example, someone like yourself getting involved in the process of, let's say it's a house flip they are doing. What kind of a broad range costing can they expect?
Obviously, you have different kinds of projects, and all varying from small type of project might be single let, up to multiple units, might be 20, 25 units.
Yes.
If they do a commercial residential type of project. But just typically, if a project will be, let's say you take a house, 3 or 4 bedroom house, which is going to convert into a 7-8 bedroom HMO, we charge in around £3,000 for the whole process, which I mentioned earlier.
All the various stages.
All the various stages, take it from all the way from what the architect is suggesting, all the way to the finished product. And then, not to mention that we, in certain aspects, we also micromanage the
to
project.
ensure it's delivered correctly.
Yeah, and we liaise sometimes with the builder. You have to, if they have any questions about what they need to do.
Yes.
But also to minimize the cost in certain aspect, but also increase how much you can get a return.
Yes.
So when you're talking about a project which is going to cost you 200K in refurb cost, £3,000 in the grand scheme of everything is nothing. Not to mention that's going to give you a lot more in return once done up.
Yes, when you think about that, it's maybe 1.5% of your budget has gone towards that. But then, as we were saying earlier on, if you're achieving, for example, 20% premium over market rents, because the way this product's being created on a HMO, that's an extra £10,000-12,000 a year, reoccurring every year that you're achieving over and above the market rates.
Like I said, in my discussion, a lot of people think as a cost rather than investment, and thinking that, okay, we'll figure out once we go along and on site. But this leads to many compromises. So you have to put it on paper just as an addition to what you need from the architect.
Yes.
You want to make sure that this service completes what you need for the project to be a success.
Yes.
And then you should allow for it if you want to make the best out of the project itself. If it's allowed for, and then you want to, and then you figure out that you're going to invest 1.5%, and then you get 20% back.
Yes.
Once it's finished.
Yes.
Then it's no brainer.
Yes.
The way I see it, and then minimizes the risk, minimizes the cost, and it gives you that uplift that we always want.
Yes.
Not to mention that you're providing a product which is in high demand once done up.
Yes.
This is going to lead you to the next project. You have people coming back to you and say, you know what, this particular investor, this particular brand is doing something which I really love.
Yes.
And then, as we well know, then you have probably 7 different tenants in your property, which they're going to rave about the place they live in.
Yeah.
Then they share with their friends.
Yes.
People coming over and then spend the day. You know what? Look at these guys. They even have, I don't know, a wine cooler in the kitchen. They might have a PlayStation. They might have this. They might have that. They have a really nice garden design, which we also do, and then a lot of time is neglected.
Yes.
You might spend a lot of time doing the interiors. What about the gardens? And in those 2 or 3 months, which you can spend in the garden as well. And then that could be an extension of your property as well.
Yes.
And make a use out of it. So you have to choose all these areas which are usually neglected, and then make the best out of it.
And they add so much value. If I think back to my earlier renovations I used to do, we used to do nothing in the garden, just clear it out, put everything in the skip, and that's it. It's finished. It's cleared. And best case scenario might be we change the fence panels, and that was it. That would be the early renovations. But when you think about how much time people might spend in those, and the how pleasing a pleasant garden can be, and an impact it will have, for example, if you're selling. And we were talking earlier about a project that we're doing, some apartments that we're building to sell, and involving you in those, and creating the visualization, they can be done very early. So for example, if you're flipping a property like this one we're talking about now, we create the visualizations in terms of how they will look, the layout and everything, and actually we can start marketing those properties to sell rather than waiting until they're finished and they're completed, because this will massively help in getting the sales in early.
With every big development project, you'll see renders online.
Yes.
So why not apply to smaller projects as well? A lot of people think this is just for big developers, which is definitely not the case.
It's probably the perception is, it costs a huge amount of money, but the technology has advanced so much as well now that actually doesn't need to cost tens of thousands of pounds for these.
200 or 300 years ago, only the rich people would afford the interior designer.
Yes.
But nowadays, that's not the case.
Yes.
So a lot of people, they still have that impression that it's a big cost. They're not educated in the subject. They don't know exactly how it can help them. and then basically they stay away from that.
Yes.
They know for sure that they need drawings from the architect.
Yes.
They all go to that. They accept that cost, and that they need that. But they say, okay, let's go. And then they need a builder as well.
Yes.
They think, I don't necessarily need an interior designer. Yes, you don't need one. You'll get an average type product. You attract what you offer. Sometimes it's not the best solution because you might have more voids, more damages as well. Because obviously, if you're creating a product which is directed to the right avatar,
Yes.
which is a 9 or 10 out of 10,
Yes.
then your property is going to be more looked after,
Yes.
have less voids and damages. Obviously, from time to time, you have to fix one thing or the other, which comes as a standard.
Yes.
But you have less of, definitely for sure.
Yes. So with projects like these, when you're doing them, tell me about the type of projects you're kind of involved in at the moment, because we were talking before, there's lots of different types that you'll get involved in.
Yeah, I have a background of doing interior design for mid to high-end properties, but at one point I said, why not taking all this knowledge and then put it in to action or work with the property investors, as we have an interest in property ourselves. And we started working with the HMO investors and people doing commercial residential projects. So this type of strategies are the ones we focusing the most. Just basically,
we'll share some images as well as you explain.
Yeah, as the issue that we found is we don't have enough of the right type of accommodation for these tenants. So we want to create a win-win situation, both for investors and also for those tenants which they're looking for something more a bit more premium, which they want to call home.
Yeah, so what we're talking about now is not just something that works for the investor in terms of making more money, but actually a fantastic product that's desired by the customer, the tenant.
Yeah, as well, because we just want to create a product which is not just a compromise for the tenant, them being in a position then scrolling for hours on spare room and not find that type of room which they're willing to pay a bit more. And to create that product which the investor will be proud of, also the tenant to move in and they'll be really happy about, rather than just a room to live in. So we focus on premium HMOs and also commercial to residential project, which will be other lets, will be short lets, or these are our main focuses.
And in terms of what stage people should be thinking about having a conversation with someone like yourself, should it be, when they're exploring the idea of taking on a property, once they've acquired it, once they've worked out what they want to do? What sort of, I know you talked about early, but how early should you get involved?
We have all types of scenarios. Sometimes time is the essence, and then we have to move on things really quick because we're already starting the project. And then we tackle the mechanical and electrical drawings very early, because they need to have an understanding where everything goes, or to go to tender to do that. But if we get involved early on in the process, as soon as you agreed on the property, as soon as you have a survey done by the architect, even without having the planning permission all agreed, we can move and then start looking at the drawings and then plan things. So the earliest, the better. As soon as we get some drawings from the architect, the survey is done by them. We can look at the DWG drawings, which are the drawings done by the architect.
The AutoCAD drawings,
the AutoCAD version of it in a different format. And then we start looking at that, because every single stage of the process takes time. We'll just give you an example. We look at those drawings, we present something to you, we'll have a discussion, and then we might have 2 changes, and then we have to do another meeting to discuss that, maybe another one. So we need to allow time for each specific stage of the process. Not to be rushed by time. If you're making decisions being rushed, you might end up having the wrong decision.
Yeah. And even if someone, for example, is flipping a property and they're looking to get you involved in a project, and they can use those images for marketing, as I was talking about earlier on, that we're looking to do. And as you find potential buyers and they're interested and they're willing to commit, you can start tweaking the finish for them and actually even show them what it will look like before the project is even finished.
Yeah, if the project you intend to sell those units, obviously you can suggest something to the potential buyer.
Yes.
But also what we've done in another project, we've done some options and we create certain price bands. For example, one was going to be within your budget, within your asking price. One was like the second level up, or it'd be a third.
Yes.
And
so
then
like tiers of budget. Yes.
Tiers of budget, and then you can give some options within each one. Let's say this particular price band gives you this much or these options.
Yes, for example, it could be different quality of kitchen worktop or certain type of tiles or floor finishing.
Flooring as well, or there's so many different aspects we can include. And then if they involved us really early in the process, you can even have a discussion with the actual buyer, and then it can give that indication, and then give them a good understanding what they're going to get once done up.
Yes.
You can take those choice, put it back into renders, give it to them as a choice, and then they know when they're buying the property is the right finishes for them.
Yes, and that gives you a massive advantage over any other flips that might be happening, because if somebody is in the market for looking at a newly renovated home and they don't have much choice in terms of what's already there, it is what it is at that point. And generally they're not looking to spend more money changing it because it's already finished, it's ready to move into. Whereas they could get involved a little bit earlier, that property is much more appealing to them because they can customize a few things the way they want.
Yeah. What a lot of people do, investors, they want to go on the safe route, and they say, let's go with neutral colors.
Yes.
This is what a lot of people want, I think. But obviously we're all different.
Yes.
And then if I'm going to show you a property, and then I lined up 10 different people, 10 different families that they're going to looking at the same property, they're going to come back with different opinions about the same property. And then why not have that option customized as much as possible for them?
Yes.
If you have time in your advantage, then you can just go back to the property. Let's change this, let's change that.
Yes.
Then you have more impact on how much you can ask for it.
Yes.
Because they are the ones asking for
the changes.
They are the ones asking for all the extras. It's not you that are doing the upsell. You can say you can have the property for this much.
Yes.
But if you want to have a better worktop, if you want a better flooring, you have these options as well. And then if you speak to them 3 or 4 months before actually implementing those finishes, you have time on your hand, and you go back to your kitchen manufacturer, you go back to the retailer which you're going to get flooring from, you can go back to your builder and say, you know what, this has changed.
Yes.
And then you work with certain timelines, and then say, we have this much to decide on flooring, this much to decide on kitchens. Let's work towards that.
Yes.
And then you're going to have a better, a happier buyer. At the end of it.
And an earlier commitment to that sale. Because when we're selling, you know, the bit that we often can't control is how long is it going to take to find a buyer? When's it going to complete? But actually in this scenario, what you're doing is you're finding buyers early, and because they're asking for customization, they are committing to that purchase early. So you're pretty much, back in the olden days, they would have said sold off plan before you've even finished your construction. And that's the perfect scenario. And one of our biggest challenges on developments is time. We're trying to push for time, but if that speeds up that process, because we've planned out things earlier on and we've got the ability to be able to customize things, it means we can get off that site quicker and move on to something else. So
even a standard flip, let's say you take a property and then you're adding a really nice extension and a loft conversion as well. If you have renders for that on how it's going to look like, obviously the project is going to take a few months to complete, 3 or 4 months, maybe 6, depending who's working on this, and then how everything goes. But before pressing the button on those type of works, you can have the renders done.
Yes, yes.
And then it gives you a massive advantage, in my opinion. Not to mention that you cover all the technical aspects before that. The builder knows exactly what they're going to be doing based on the spec that you provided. You're making informed decision based on the renders. And then also on the other hand, you go out to market and then use those images to market the property.
Yes.
And then it's a win-win.
Yes, and these renders, the images we're talking about, are so realistic these days. When you look at them, often it's quite difficult to tell whether this is actually a photograph or this is something that's computer generated.
Yeah, I've been asked so many times.
Yes.
I've been showing renders, realistic renders to people I've been talking with.
Yeah.
Then they ask, are these the real images? No, they're not the computer generated
Yes.
images. We can even do now 360 degrees these rooms in the room itself. So you can spin around, you can see the ceiling, you can see the floor,
Yes.
you can look at the worktop closely.
So you can like move around within the room to really get a feel of how it's gonna be.
That is gonna help you as well to imagine yourself being that space.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, is another layer of.
And I think this is the kind of thing we'd think about at like, the top end, the premium end of the market. If you're creating a product like a £2 million mansion, you definitely need to be doing things like that. But now it's so much more accessible for these smaller projects and even entry-level projects. And by tapping into that early, you've got an advantage over your competitors as well.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the project is quite lengthy. It comes out with its all sorts of challenges, and then if this is going to help you to make it a bit smoother, just thinking all these boxes, which you know that you're just wondering, and then you might have sleepless nights thinking about it, and then the builder is going to bombard you with all these questions about this, and the other, and at the end of it, to come up with a better product and then higher selling value, higher rent. I think it is the way to go. And then I'm trying to pass the idea that interior design is not about the last stage of the process, which is the aesthetics. It goes back to the functionality. It goes back to behavior. If your flip is directed to, let's say you're going to sell this to a family of four, so let's design it for a family of four.
Yes.
And then let's market to those people. Let's engage them and to the buying process.
Yes.
Bring them in. Imagine you having the power, or when you approach them, or they approach you, they say, you know what, these certain elements, they haven't been decided on. We give you the freedom of choosing this or the other, rather than coming and then, you know what, we've decided that a gray kitchen is going to be the right one for you. And then when in reality, they prefer a dark blue kitchen.
Yes, yes.
If to give them that freedom, obviously you're going to have a big advantage if you compare yourself.
Rather than imposing your own design ideas on them, you're giving them choice to customize what they want and what's important to them.
It's a very personal decision. And then they're going to be living in that home for many years to come. And then rather than them saying, okay, you know what? Let's have this property, even though it doesn't have the best kitchen, the one we've chosen. But you know what? We've been looking for a year or so. Let's get this one. You come back to them and say, you know what? We have this in place for you, and let's make it right for you.
Yeah, and with the buying process, the way it tends to work is somebody will say, yes, I'm interested. A property will get marked, sold subject to contract, and then it may go through many, many weeks before it reaches completion. And of course, as we're well aware, maybe about a third of those, for whatever reason, never actually reach completion. And if you're in that third, then you're back to square one again. Whereas in this case, because they've committed to you, the certainty of completion is there, which is massive from a developer's point of view.
Yeah, it is. It is. Obviously now the processes are much more affordable, for the investors like to tap into, but they need to know what this all involves.
Yes.
And then to understand that it's us as interior designer, we're on their side.
Yes.
Your side as an investor, not on the other side. And then we are part of the team that build these type of projects.
Yes. Gabriel, this has been a thoroughly enjoyable conversation, and I think this is a topic that very few people talk about and even few implement. So I think from that point of view, it's definitely been interesting. What's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm very active on social platforms like Facebook, on Instagram, especially on Facebook, so
Yes.
which is my name, Gabriel Avramoaica, quite easy to find. And then you can find out more on our website,
Yes.
which is ariinteriors.uk.
And we'll link those, we'll put them on the screen, and we'll also link them up in the description as well.
Perfect.
Gabriel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Great to be here.